Good afternoon. No, good morning. Let's start that over. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening. No matter when you're listening, where you're listening, we're glad that you are. John Buzby along with Marty Sheehan. This is a special production of the podcast this week. We're going to be talking on this particular podcast about the Class 2 playoffs only. And so if you're interested in Class 3, that dropped, and so did Class 1 on different podcasts. So we hope you're interested in all three. But we know a lot of fans are interested just in whatever team they follow in the class that's involved in that. So that's why we did it this way this time. Before we talk about Class 2, I want to remind you about the Unified Flag Football tournament that takes place. Students with and without intellectual disabilities playing against each other in flag football. Very serious tournament. It's Special Olympics athletes along with their peers in their high schools, their respective high schools. It all kicks off on November 15th when Cape Henlopen and William Penn do a play-in game. 9 total teams made the playoffs, and so a play-in game to come to the 8. Then there's quarterfinal games. Newark Charter will play the winner of the Cape Henlopen William Penn game. That's on November 29th. All these games are on November 29th. McCain faces Mount Pleasant. Appoquinimink faces Middletown in a neat district rivalry, and then Cesar Rodney faces Smyrna. So check out the schedules. Even if you don't go to that school, don't have a child to go to that school, it's always great to see. It's a great, fun thing, but they take it very seriously. And they're all in it to hoist the state championship trophy, Marty. And you know that as well as I do.
Yeah, the competitiveness in these games is just incredible. I watch each year on the NFHS network. They've been kind enough to show these games, and man, these kids go all out. Whether it's the unified partner or the kids themselves, it's amazing to see. And there's some talent out there. It's fun to watch.
There is, yeah.
And when it gets down to the nitty gritty, these kids want the state championship just as much as anybody else does.
They sure do. All right. Before we go into the games, I want to let you know about ticket policies. They've been different for every stadium all year long. And these are DIAA hosted games. And I know that they're working with the individual stadiums and the schools that are hosting the game to determine what the ticket policies are. Some schools have had very lenient policies: show up, pay cash, go online, get tickets, show up, and that's it. And then there's been the other end of the scale. We talked about what the Appoquinimink district did, where it was very, very challenging to get a ticket, but challenging in a good way, and that they knew everybody who was coming into that stadium. Not sure where that's going to fall for any of the stadiums, but so what we're doing just as a favor is make sure you look into the game you want to go to. Don't wait till Friday afternoon and find out that the ticket deadline to get tickets, whether it's online or in person, was on Thursday. Assume you're not going to be able to walk up and pay cash. I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but assume that unless you find out specifically differently. So that's just kind of a public service announcement. Just make sure you find out what the ticket policy is going to be before you head to the game. All right. And last thing before we get into the games, don't forget about Andre L Photography. It's not too late to have him come out and take pictures of your son or daughter that's playing in a state tournament, whether it's football or another sport. And then, of course, we still have the winter in the spring seasons. He's a very professional photographer. He's a professional photojournalist. That's the right way to call him. You'll see him on sidelines at a lot of different games. He was a photojournalist for the News Journal for years, full time. Now he does do some work for them on the side and some other news agencies. And so if you want good pictures of your child, make sure that you call him and check out his website at Andre L Photography. That's EL. So AndreELphotography.com. And don't miss the opportunity to have great action shots of your child taken while they're still playing sports, because it doesn't last forever, as Marty and I both know. All right, so let's talk about Class 2. It's the only of the 3 classes where there are byes. And so the top 4 seeds in order: Caravel, St. Mark's, Wilmington Friends, Howard, all have byes. Marty, I don't think anybody is shocked that those 4 teams got the byes. I think if you had asked me to pick which 4 teams at the beginning of the season would probably have the byes, I probably would have picked those 4. Maybe not in that order,
right?
But those 4 would have been on my list. How about you?
I agree. The one team that's really surprised me, of course, is Friends. I did not see an undefeated season for them coming, including some massive victories they've had. It's funny, though. They only check in as the number 3 seed behind St. Mark's with a loss, of course, and Caravel, who's also undefeated. But Friends, and we talked about this in part of the season, and I remember we actually even got a tweet about thanks for the motivation from Caravel, I think it was. But Friends was kind of in the same boat where they just didn't play a lot of great teams.
Mm-mm.
And because of that, it hurt their schedule strength.
Right.
And they're down at number 3 seed now. Does it matter? No. You're going to have to go through the same people. If they're the only difference is going to be is if they meet in the semifinals. If they meet St. Mark's, they won't have a home game. But
Right.
that hasn't seemed to matter where they play this year. So,
Mm.
yeah, I think these are, you look at Caravelle, Howard, St. Mark's, and Friends, they would have been my picks at the beginning of season 2.
And I'm not sure in the playoffs, especially how much home field advantage really matters. Maybe turf versus grass, but typically the grass fields that they play on have to be in pretty good shape to play on. If your team travels or decides not to travel to an away game, then that's on the school. Shame on
Yes.
you, because we live in Delaware. This isn't Texas where you might have to hop on a plane and go see your team play in the
Right.
playoffs. Everybody's within an hour ride of everybody else for by and far.
Agreed.
And so, you know, there you can't squawk a lot about the home field advantage thing. Make it your home field by getting your school to the other place.
Yep.
And
Yep.
create the home atmosphere there if you can. So it's going to be, it's going to be fun. This class 2, it's the one that we thought at the beginning of the year that was going to have the most parity. I think that's still the case. Although class 3 certainly is challenging with that. But again, we think there's a front runner to win the class 3 championship. I'm not sure we think there's a front runner in this class 2 thing. I think there's a lot of parity in it. And we're going to start with Newark and Tower Hill. Again, if you're only listening to this class 2 pod, class 1 and class 3 are available on different pods. But what we've done is we've started, if you're basically looking at the bracket in front of you, we're going to start with the top of the bracket and then go to the bottom of the bracket as we work our way to the state championship. So we'll start with number 8 Newark against number 9 Tower Hill. Newark comes in with a record of 7-3. They have one win versus a playoff team. That was Concord. 3 of their losses, all 3 of them were to playoff teams. So I look at those as 2 positive things.
Yep.
Maybe their most impressive win was a 36-35 win against Hodson just last week on Frank Moffitt Celebration Day. So they not only played up a class, they also played during a game when probably Hodson wanted to win more than
emotions
any other
were
time
high, absolutely,
during
yep.
the season.
Yep.
They had a great celebration for Frank Moffitt. Congratulations to him on his retirement. While I'm thinking of it, congratulations to Randy Holmes retiring from Mount Pleasant, also after 20 years as the head coach, 29 years as a coach on the football staff. So congratulations to him. But back to Newark, that I think might have been their most impressive win. Jody Russell, the head coach there at his alma mater, he's kind of turned that things around. They've made the playoffs for the second year in a row. Granted, the Class 3 system allows for that, but that's what the Class 3 system was built for. They haven't been to the playoffs 2 years in a row since Butch Simpson left, which for some people might seem like, wow, he was just there. Well, that's not the case.
No.
He's been gone for more than a decade now
and
retiring in Florida and happy as can be.
Yep.
So that's the status of Newark. Tower Hill 5-4. One of the negatives was their 2 wins were against Class A teams. And so they've only got 5 wins. 2 of them were against Class 1A team, a step below. But their losses were all to good teams, quality teams that are in the playoffs. So that's one of the good things about that. So, Marty, 8-9, you'd expect it to be a toss-up, and I think that's what this one is.
I think it is too. I think 3 of these 4 first-round matchups in 2A are going to be toss-ups. I think in this one, Tower Hill, their schedule strength isn't great, and again they're playing those independent teams, which sometimes weighs a team down. I thought their most impressive win was just this past week was against Tatnall. Although a Class 1 team, I really thought Tatnall was going to win that game. Tatnall's played well down the stretch. For Newark, oh, and by the way, for Tower Hill, the guys who do the majority of the work, and no secret that they're captains, Dominic Peatlock and Joshua Hall, running back, and Peatlock is sort of a hybrid type. They do pretty much everything for Coach Waisco, and I believe his son Michael Waisco is the quarterback, and he's a freshman. Tower Hill is one of those teams that doesn't fill out anything. Occasionally they'll fill out the box score, but beyond that, you look on Max Preps and there's like 1 game worth of stuff on there. So it's very hard. By the way, in Delaware, we should tell people if they get upset that we don't talk about stats and stuff. We rely on everything we get from the coaches.
Right.
And this year we didn't really do that well this year with the coaches. Last year we got a ton more information. I'm not sure what happened, but we didn't get a lot of help from the coaches. Now the ones we did, thank you very much. I think Jody Russell at Newark has done a great job there. This was a program I sort of think of like Charter, where Newark was just dead in the water. You know, they
Mhm.
had this great tradition, but in the two-class system, they just did not fit in.
Right.
And now they're thriving. 7-3, 4-2. Uh, I thought their most impressive performance of the season, not a win, but the most impressive performance was their 21-20 loss to St. Mark's.
Agree.
And part of that was the fact, and we talked about it at the time, was that their kicker was not there. So they went for two every time. And, you know, if their kicker's there, you know, who knows?
Mhm.
Maybe they pull the upset there. Marquis Ellerby has had a great season. The quarterback, Damian Wright. Jair Townsend does a little bit of everything for them. Their big win, of course, was Concord, a playoff team, 31-7. And as you said, I loved, you know, I watched that Hodgson game and it was just incredible. I forget the quote I used, but it was basically, it was like the most infuriating,
Right.
fun game that I've seen in a long time.
I think ugly was in there
Yes,
too.
ugly. It
Ugliest.
was, oh my God, there were penalties, there were snaps over heads, there were block punts, there was a little bit of everything. But the one thing there was, and I said gritty as well, because
Mhm.
these two teams they both wanted that win so badly. And it was just a lot of fun. And frankly, it's a memorable game for Coach Moffett, because they had the celebration for him and everything.
Mm.
Yeah, I think this is a toss up too. I think Tower Hill is capable of playing to Newark's level. If Newark has an off day, they're definitely capable of being beat
Yeah.
by
Mhm.
anybody. I do think they're the stronger team with more talent. They seem to have a great structure offensively and defensively. They seem to have a little bit more upperclassmen than Tower Hill does. So, great game. I think Newark probably takes this, or would be the favorite, but a good first round matchup.
And the winner will take on Caravel. So
Oh, good luck
whoever
with that.
wins this game has to go play at Caravel.
Oof.
We'll talk about them next week
Yeah.
in that game, but they've done a lot of scoring
Yes.
and not given up very many
You know, it's
points.
funny. I was going to say Caravel will give up as many points this weekend as they have in 5 other games this
Right.
season, which
Which would be 0.
yes.
All right. So next is Archmere and Concord, number 5 versus number 12. Archmere comes in at 7-2. Their 2 losses were back-to-back losses against Howard and Friends. So 2 quality losses,
Yep.
but still, I don't think anybody expected Archmere to lose 2 games in a row. Now,
No.
could have been win Howard, lose Friends, lose Howard, win Friends, or whatever. I don't think anybody expected John Belace's team to lose 2 in a row, but they did. But to their credit, they rebounded then with a solid win against St. Mark's. And I believe St. Mark's was undefeated at that
They
time. I
were.
think they
Yep.
handed them their first loss.
Yep.
And St. Mark's had one of those wins was against Appoquinimink.
Yeah.
Now the number
That's
2
right.
seed in the
That's
Class
right.
3 playoffs. So they were no slouches. So John Belace got his team back on schedule. And my guess, if you asked him, he would tell you maybe the best thing that happened to him all season was losing in weeks 3 and 4 to them team. They ended their season with a 29-8 quality win over Delaware Military Academy, which I don't think a lot of people saw that being as lopsided as at least the score made it to appear. Number 12, Concord comes in at 4-6. So a team with a losing record gets in because they're taking 12 teams. They had 0 wins against playoff teams. One positive is that one of their losses was only by a point to Delaware Military Academy, which if you had asked anybody at the beginning of the season whether that game was going to be a 1-point game, they would have told you you're crazy. DMA is probably going to run and clock them, and they didn't. So, credit to Concord there, head coach Tom Wood. So, Marty, I think this isn't as close as the 8 and 9. It's not supposed to be
Right.
5 versus 12. You know, Archmere defending state champion. A lot of people had them right back in the championship. Not sure if they'll get there or not. We'll see. But you know, if you're a betting man, you're probably betting on Archmere over Concord. But hey, it's the playoffs. You never know.
That's right. Yeah, I think this is one of those. It's kind of like a 3-14 matchup in the NCAA tournament. There's not a lot of 14s that'll win. You get up into the 4 and 13. Yeah, you can do that. But this just feels like Archmere is clicking on all cylinders right now, firing on all cylinders. Concord, again, they've really struggled. The one game, and it's impressive, that 13-12 loss to DMA, because remember, they were missing half their roster because of the flu. They have a 48-man roster. They were missing 23 of them for that game, including some key players, according to some folks on Twitter. So I think Tom Wood has done a nice job. They're being outscored by an average of 25-17. That's not a good sign. Archmere is only allowing 13 points a game. So this really adds up to an Archmere win, I think. As you said, no quality wins over playoff teams. Archmere, Chris Albero, my goodness, this kid, he was the player of the year last year. You know, we got some stats from Coach Belace, and thank you to him. Albero's 1,500 yards passing, 21 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's also run for 457 yards and 6 touchdowns. Oh, yeah, he's also made 30 out of 32 PATs and is 3 of 3 on field goals for the season. So he does a little bit of everything. I saw the 30 out of 32 PATs. I
Right.
mean, he's kicking at James Collins' consistency level.
Right.
Now, not the leg of James Collins
No, but
necessarily,
don't need
but
that for extra
yeah,
points.
exactly. So you have some difference makers in this tournament, the kicking game. They're not going to need it in this game, most likely. Kieran Udovich is their big guy on defense, 38 tackles, 2.5 sacks. That's only in 6 games. He's coming back from an injury, so he'll be at full strength. Nate Morta and Don Anarino, the leading tacklers for the team. Archmere, when they had that loss, the loss to Howard, or excuse me, to Friends, that was just so stunning. And remember, they fell way behind Howard at first, too,
Right.
before they
Yeah.
staged a late comeback. Those 2 games sort of really shook them up because, as you said, they come out the next week. St. Mark's was so fired up for that game and they lost. Archmere looked great. It was a systematic kind of takedown. It wasn't a fluky win by any means. And Archmere, over the course of the last several games of the season, really reestablished themselves as one of the favorites. I don't think it would surprise anybody if Archmere wins another state title. They have that kind of talent, but it's loaded in,
Yeah.
in class 2 right now. So I think they do get passes. This is a great game opportunity for Concord. Again, they're back in the playoffs. Congratulations to the Raiders. Hopefully it's the beginning of a run for them over the years to come. But I think Archmere just a little way too much for them right now.
And the winner is going to take on Howard. And, Marty, I'm going to apologize to Archmere because now that I'm looking at, I talked about the top 4 teams and whether I would have picked them. I would have had Archmere in that top 4 too. I'm not sure who I would have taken out. So I would have,
I thought
Caravelle,
about
St.
that
Mark's,
too.
Wilmington Friends, and Howard. I'm not sure who I would have taken out, but I
Yeah.
definitely would have had Archmere in there.
Howard was the team at the beginning of the season. I remember we kept saying, we got to see, because last year they were 5-5. They got eliminated in the first round.
Yeah.
They had a spectacular season. Coach Ritter got them right back to where they were before.
They sure did. Yeah. So anyway, Archmere I probably would have had in it, and I'm not sure. It doesn't matter who I would have had out. It is what it is. All right. So that's the top half of the bracket. Before we go to the bottom half, I want to remind you, if you're looking to buy or sell your house, Mary Kate Johnson will help you do it as if it was her own. An award-winning realtor with 20 years of experience. She helped my wife and I sell our house and buy our new house as well. We've since recommended her to dozens of friends who have done the same, and nothing but positive things to say about her. Doesn't matter what the real estate market is, you need a realtor to make sure you can navigate it, whether it's a first home, an upsize, downsize for you, a parent, whatever. Mary Kate will help you every step of the way. That's Mary Kate Johnson of Remax Associates. Her website is marykatej.remax.com. That's marykatej.remax.com. 5-star reviews on Zillow and lots of great things that people say. You can check them out as well. And if you end up using her as a realtor, you tell her that you heard about her on the podcast. She'll give you a 1-year free home appliance warranty, something she did for my wife and I. We still use it 16 years later. All right, let's look at the bottom half of the bracket. Start with number 7, Red Lion versus number 10, Delmar. Red Lion comes in at 7-3. Just one of those wins was against a playoff team, and it was a Class 1 team in Odessa. Just pointing that out. The positive is that their 3 losses were to quality playoff teams. In fact, 3 teams that if you looked at the schedule, you would have said, I bet they're going to lose to these 3 teams. Their team is loaded with talented freshmen, especially in the skills positions, but also on the defensive side of the ball. These guys are going to be playing in a playoff for the first time in their life. And so that's going to be new to them.
Yep.
They're playing number 10 Delmar, which is one of the most experienced playoff teams in Delaware history. And so nothing new to this Delmar team. Now they are going to have to travel up and play against Red Lion. Delmar, I think, was a surprise to people. Only 4-6.
Yep.
Only 2 of those wins were against playoff teams. All their losses were against playoff teams as well, if you want to look at that as, a positive thing in a weird kind of way. But I don't think anybody expected Delmar, Marty, to ever be a 10 seed in this new class system in Class 2.
No, I agree. And I think Dave Hearn's bunch, they really struggled at times this season. I want to correct you on one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Red Lion has beaten 2 playoff teams this year. The other one is Delmar.
It is Delmar. That's right.
They beat Delmar
right.
20-19 early this season.
Yep. So,
it is the only
other than Delmar.
Yep. I believe in the 3 classes, it is the only first round matchup that's a rematch, which is kind of amazing. But this Red Lion team, boy, Evan Budinger, the freshman quarterback, 1,500 yards, 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Most of those came early in the season as he was kind of getting his feet wet. They played, to open the season, they started with St. Mark's. They played Caravelle. They played Sussex Tech. So they played some teams that had some good strengths. Sam Crossan has been amazing. He's one of those James Collins type weapons that can
Mhm.
be the difference in a game. Unfortunately, they don't list his field goals. He's 33 of 36 on PATs, which is just incredible. And Malik Pinkett, another freshman, as his family corrected me on Twitter several times when I called him a sophomore. Yeah, these young kids, 686 yards. He's averaging 10 yards a carry, 13 touchdowns. Seth McGroarty and Kyle Manley are the two wide receivers combined, 1,100 yards, 17 touchdowns. They've got Jack Wilson and Carter Soreka are the two big guys on defense, 14 tackles for loss between them. For Del Mar, it's surprising, as you said. I did not see this coming from them. You look at their schedule, and they open with Friends. Of course, that was tough. They never expected to lose the game to Red Lion. They got off to a great start. They were 3-1, and then they ran into some trouble. Cape Henlopen, Caravel Academy, of course, Lake Forest, Laurel. It's not like they lost to bad teams.
No.
They did give up a lot of points, and I think that's the one aspect, because Del Mar has always been known as a very good defensive team. So they have given up some points, but some of that is due to the fact that the offense can't sustain drives. So they're giving the ball to the opponent in good field position. And, it's one of those years. I don't know if they have a lot of young, because Del Mar, again, unfortunately, is one of those teams that really doesn't keep statistics. I couldn't find very much on them at all, except they're, going through their box scores. But, Dave Hearn, as you said, always has a really strong squad. They're being outscored this year, 26-21. But because of their history and because of Red Lion's inexperience, and Ken Anderson has done a fantastic job with this Red Lion team, and they had to get a lot done at the end of the season,
Mhm.
including the game against Woodbridge, which I think it was 14-8 at halftime,
Yes.
and then ended up scoring 61
61
points.
points.
So it was that
Wake up.
they're explosive, yeah. But I do think, because of the experience factor, and because Del Mar only lost by 1 point to them, Del Mar's going to go into this with confidence because of who the opponent is.
Right.
We've got a bunch of young kids on here. If we can rattle them early, we can pull this out. To me, this is a toss-up game, a really good first-round matchup.
And the winner is going to head to the graveyard and play St. Mark's, a team which a lot of people think could make it to and win the state championship, just like any of the first four teams
Absolutely.
that had the buys, and throw Archmere in there as well. So Red Lion against Del Mar, winner gets St. Mark's. All right, so last game of this bracket in the first round, number 6 Lake Forest comes in with an 8-2 record, and they're going to face number 11 Delaware Military Academy, comes in with a 5-5 record. I don't think anybody thought DMA would be an 11 seed. I think people would have thought they probably might have been in that top 4, had a bye, or if not, in at number 5 and number 6. Nick Lincoln will be back. He's finished serving his 30-game suspension. They've lost to Archmere and St. Mark's, 2 quality losses, and of course lost to Howard in the game that ended up being forfeited, which led to the suspension of Nick Lincoln. Their other 2 losses were to out-of-state teams that people thought that they would lose to. Lake Forest, their losses are to Sussex Tech and to Caravel. And their 3 wins are against playoff teams. So Freddie Johnson has that team playing well. They had to travel a lot. They played 4 games, I think, up here above the canal, ended up being 3-1 in those games. So, Marty, this should be a pretty good matchup, I would think. What do you thought?
This is interesting, because at the beginning of the season, I would have said that DMA would have been one of the top 5 or 6 seeds in this class. And they looked good in the opening game, which of course ended up being a forfeit, and we had the incident with in the bleachers. But I really thought they were going to be a strong team, and they got off to a decent start. They were 0-2, but of course it was the forfeit and then Archbishop Curley. Then they got a roll run 3 in a row. And then the out-of-state team hits, but then they sort of struggled. The St. Mark's game, they only scored 7 points. Newark, they scored 35. The Newark game, I remember you and I talked about, and this is when they put in Ferris as the quarterback, and it looked like things were starting to click. Then they come out the next week and they have to go to overtime and score 13 points to beat Concord 13-12. And then they only put 8 points on the board against Archmere. So I think there's still a lot there. They have so much talent. It's kind of hard to figure out what the problem is. BJ Aline is still phenomenal. He's there. DeFair Watts, Henry has done a great job. They've been the spark on offense, and their defense is usually very good. It's been spotty at times this year. They struggled down the stretch. Their only quality win to me really is that Newark win, and that was a real struggle for them. And then you put them up against a team like Lake Forest, who just seems to be, again, to use the phrase, firing on all cylinders. Freddie Johnson's team just has really kicked it in down the stretch. Jonathan Tyndall hit 12 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions all season. Kim Rivera, the running back, 600 yards, 7 touchdowns. Jameer Snell is the guy who really does a little bit of everything for them. He's carried the ball for close to 500 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's also caught more than 500 yards worth of receptions for 8 touchdowns. They're another team they've racked up. I mean, I was looking at their tackles for losses, and they look like they're close to like 30 or 40. And they have some real quality wins. Newark, Red Lion, and Delmar. Their loss was to Caravel. This was a game. I remember this was the game we said this is going to be Caravel's kind of show me moment against Lake Forest.
Yep.
Well, guess what? They showed us.
Yeah.
It was 28-0. But again, I think that was kind of a spark for Lake Forest, because they're a team now, I think, can beat anybody. You know, they come out and beat, after that Caravel loss, they scored 58, 49, and 48 points. Now, the competition wasn't great, though. Delmar was one of those teams. I think Lake Forest and Freddie Johnson, they're on a roll right now. And I just think they're going to be too much for DMA. If DMA could get the offense going, and again, they have so many good athletes. I'm not saying this is a definite. DMA, if they pulled the upset, it wouldn't shock me, but it definitely would surprise me, because I think Lake Forest right now is a team with all the momentum, and there's some upperclassmen on that team, some good leadership, and I think they're the team to beat in this one.
All righty. So I'm not going to ask you what your upset would be. You've said it. You think Lake Forest is going to win that. You think Archmere is going to win. Newark Tower Hill, that's not 8 and a 9. That's not an upset one way or the other, you know, other than statistically. Yep. Do you think Delmar has a legitimate shot to beat Red Lion?
I think Delmar has a legitimate shot, and I love what Ken Anderson has done at Red Lion. I don't want the Red Lion people to hate us, but I do think, because of the youth on the team, their first experience in the playoffs, Delmar's got some experience. Dave Hearn has been there a ton of times. He's going to have this team ready. Again, he's got the advantage in that they got the revenge factor, and they only lost by 1. I think if there's any big upsets in this first round, it's going to be Delmar over Red Lion.
I like Ken Anderson a lot too. He's a great fan of the show. I enjoyed talking with him. He always said, you talk about coaches sending stats. He gives us stuff that we could never possibly use. It's so much stuff. He does a great job of it. So, Coach, we're going to do you a favor, and we're going to pick Delmar to upset Red Lion. So now you got all the bulletin board material you need to help your team. And again, we're not rooting for any teams over any other team, but we're kind of just being funny about it. Here's the thing. I think that I hesitate to pick that upset, Marty, because the game's at Red Lion.
Yep.
I've been there on Friday nights. They pack the stands. They line the fences. That whole school will be there. Anybody that graduated from there in the last 10 years will be there. Not sure how well Delmar is going to travel from Delmar up to Red Lion. It's a solid hour and a half drive easily. I actually went down to Delmar last week for something work related, and I just kept going and going and going. But we'll see. They might bring a huge contingent up. Maybe this will spark them to do so. But
one of the things, just real quick to finish up, the game was at Red Lion, so Delmar does have experience playing there now too. So I think that's another added bonus for the team. But you're right. If you go to a Delmar game on Friday night, good grief, it's packed. But I'm with you. I don't know how many are going to be willing to make that drive. If they pack that stadium, I really like Delmar's chances even more.
All righty. So good luck to both teams. Yep. We'll leave it at that. So, all right. So again, this has been the preview of the Class 2 playoff system. And so we're going to drop this podcast. If you are interested in the Class 1 playoff system and the Class 3 playoff system, that podcast dropped as well. So just take a look at that. It should be wherever you listen to your podcast and get us regularly. We can't wait. It's playoff time. No better time of the season than right now. For Marty Sheehan, I'm John Buzby. Everybody have a great sports week.